Hello, and welcome to More Together with School District 25, where each week we'll take a deeper dive into some of the issues, accomplishments, news, and current events happening around our school communities. This is a chance for listeners to get to know the school district and learn more about the educational issues you care about the most. I'm Courtney Fisher, and joining me today is Tonya Wilkes. Tonya serves the school district in multiple roles, one of them being the district athletic director, which I'll definitely be inviting Tonya back soon to discuss the exciting projects coming up in that arena. But today, we'll be focusing on Tonya's role as the director of student support services. More specifically, we're going to be discussing the mental health challenges our children have been facing during the pandemic and the proactive ways our schools have been providing extra support to those learners who may need it. So let's get to it. Tonya, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me today, Courtney.
So before we dive into today's topic, let's find out a little bit more about you, Tonya. Can you please take a moment to share with our listeners a little bit more about yourself and the roles you serve for our school district?
Absolutely. If anybody really truly knows me, they know I don't like talking about myself too much, but I'll give you kind of a brief synopsis here. I've been in education over 25 years, not giving you exact number on purpose. Besides my passion for impacting kids' lives and identifying their strengths and goals, I've connected at a deeper level in helping high-risk learners and, of course, being involved in the athletic world. So when this position at the district office opened up, it was a perfect fit for me.
And it's been a perfect fit for us too, I must say. I mean, I'm just constantly amazed by how you balance these two roles with our district because, you know, they are different. There's some overlap, but you're just constantly looking for ways to support kids. And so I really wanted to invite you on so that we could just share a little bit about that work behind the scenes that's going on with some of our listeners. So as you know, we recently launched this podcast, and I'm excited to have you join me to discuss something that really has been on everyone's mind since last March. And that is namely our kids and their mental health.
It's been tough navigating this last year in uncharted waters. It's brought out a lot of strengths and pointed out a lot of weaknesses in all of us. The fact we took the little things like the ability to come to a building to connect with each other for granted. And as educators, we know academics is vital for the learners, and we knew the socialization was important, but we had no idea to what degree.
Right.
When we first entered the pandemic, I got to tell you, I use this analogy with my coaches as well. I feel like we went through the grieving process.
Right.
The first, it was a shock, you know, some excitement of the extended snow day feel at the very beginning when we had the soft shutdown and we were in denial of what was really happening. Then after weeks of being home, the experience of anger set in on how this impacted all of our lives, and then bargaining of what we thought we could do and control, continually trying to wrap our brains around what was happening, to a time of becoming depressed of how our lives had changed and what we had been missing.
Right, because we learned right away that, you know, we had to cancel some of our spring sports or all of our spring sports. And so we learned that impacted us immediately, right?
Right, and not in my lifetime would I ever thought I'd have to go through that or do that. So that was pretty impactful. But, you know, by May, we were definitely at the acceptance stage, and the teachers, the counselors, my coaches, all of us just stepped it into high gear and let's do this. Let's figure out how we can touch every kid's life.
Right. So, I mean, you brought up a really good point. So in the face of that global pandemic, you know, we had to immediately just do an about face, right? Because we were confronted with so many complex challenges as we moved to quickly shift classes to an online format, providing equitable access for all learners, supporting our teachers, and supporting our learners with really different educational needs, and making all these plans against great uncertainty, right? So the pandemic itself caused a lot of worry and stress, and as you just mentioned, grief. These stressors cause mental health challenges for anyone and can cause acute symptoms to appear for people who may be experiencing pre-existing mental health challenges. So would it be fair to say that that's an accurate picture that you know paints the picture of what we've seen across School District 25 since the pandemic began? And can you share with us some of the ways that we as a school district have worked to effectively address these issues?
Yeah, we definitely, it's an accurate picture of what has happened, and not just kids, staff as well. I think the pandemic actually put us all on the same playing field as far as we are struggling with this technology, communication, and stress in different levels. Anxiety and depression can go often undetected in the best circumstances.
Right.
And now we just added another level to this. But the teachers and counselors have used multiple avenues to reach out to students, and it's been a district priority for years to address the learners as the whole child. We take care of, the physical needs, the supply needs, the social emotional needs, and so forth. So that has played in our favor.
Right.
We've established a foundation of professional development in, the gatekeeper training with Idaho Lives project. We've already, established a routinely professional development on the suicide prevention, restorative practices, creating a trauma-informed classroom. Visible learning, one of our main effect size goals was relationships. And second step is a curriculum program that we have in our secondary levels, and Rachel's challenge. All of these things are encompassing what we need today. But what is the challenge is, what does it look like in today's world?
Right.
It's changed.
And so we've always had that intentional approach, and I think that's something that may have been overlooked through this pandemic about, now you read in the media that people are worried about kids' mental health, teachers' mental health, all of our mental health. This has been a struggle for all of us that have been involved. And as, people keep pointing out to me, namely, we were on a call earlier today with Southeast Idaho Public Health, and, it's been pointed out multiple times that educators have really had the biggest challenges to face in a lot of regards. So what would you say are some of the biggest school-related stressors for kids as they've been going through this, and right now as we're looking back to going to school for all learners in person on Monday?
I'm gonna get to that question just in a second, our biggest challenge. But to go back a little bit, and you talk about what teachers and counselors and SROs and community resource workers in our school districts have done. And it's amazing that, all of these people were in place prior. All of these people had to learn a different way to impact children's lives. And I just want to give a shout out on just a couple of things that people are doing right now.
Of course.
Miss Noyes, and Miss Hingland at Hawthorne, the counselors attend health classes on a monthly basis, creating personal safety plans on mental health needs, creating a counseling center, Google Classroom at all the middle school levels that help maintain contact with the students. Mr. Walker, you've probably seen the news article, and we can talk a little bit more about that later. Miss Foltz over at Alameda, same thing, just talking about sleeping patterns and their pride and being able to really connect to each student on an individual level. And then even at the elementary level, Miss Olson at Green Acres with their mindfulness, Miss Lacey over at Wilkes, going into every class every week and teaching some health lessons. These are just a snippet of what is going on in individual schools. So, even with our learners stepping up, student government having a spirit week online,
right.
Everybody just, the silver lining to this is we did things, now we got to look how to do things out of the norm of face-to-face.
Absolutely. So we're just taking things that we've done normally, and we have to look at them through a new lens, right? So that we can continue that sense of normalcy and meet those kinds of needs, but it looks really different on the end user, right?
Exactly. So to go back to your first question there about the various support systems and so forth, it's critical to understand, even with our hybrid learning, it is not our top choice. Nobody would ever choose that. We're doing what we need to do in the time, and to be a good partner with the community health department and things like that. And the same with, what we're doing with mental health. This isn't our top choice, but this is the best choices and the best reactions and the best impact right now. And that is just, using our school counselors, using our CRWs, SROs, behavior techs, Health West, and so forth, all of those things to go to that next level.
Right. We've all had to adapt to completely new situations. So while it's not or has not been ideal, we're adapting as we go, and we're improving as we go along, which is really education in general always. Absolutely. Right?
We're learning life skills. We're learning every day.
I have to say, I have 2 kids in the school district, and I have a middle schooler and a high schooler, and I think that they've learned some really important life lessons that they may not have learned outside of a pandemic that are going to carry them through as they enter college and enter some of these new experiences.
And thank you for bringing that up, Courtney. Absolutely right. our thoughts are, processing positively of, what can we learn from this? Not what we're missing. What
Right.
can we learn? And how can we grow from this? And how can we be better human beings from this?
Right. I think that's really been important. And I think that's kind of forced people into that growth mindset where, that's where the learning happens.
Absolutely.
Is within that growth. So, all right. So back to what would you say some of the biggest school-related stressors for kids are right now?
I think some of the biggest school stressors for kids right now would be the online learning, the communication, being able to reach out for support, the social isolation, if you will.
Right.
Being next to somebody in class is different being next to somebody in a Google Meet. And then the schedule. Holy moly. When their online days, going to sleep on the proper time at night and getting up at the proper time and having that schedule is so important. I don't think the kids or the parents really realized how important that is.
Right. And I think that's going to be a big adjustment moving forward. I know my kids are sleeping in, going to bed later, and that's going to be a big adjustment for everyone come, when we return to school 5 days a week. So you've been a teacher, right?
Absolutely.
You've been a school principal. Now you're district administrator. And you've seen this firsthand, so you know very well that for our learners, school is more than just a place to learn. It's also a place to share personal challenges with the teachers and staff that they trust. There's, you've talked about relationships, and there's such a level of trust, right? Tell us about some of the various support systems our schools have in place.
Okay. Like I said before, it's kind of our norm that we do all these things, but just some really cool support systems I don't think the public really knows deeply about is that we do have community resource workers in the buildings at all different levels. We have school resource officers that are reaching out, doing home visits, putting on parent seminars like last night.
Tell us a little bit about what happened last night.
Last night, the Picoult Police Department put on a parents' night out, and they brought in children's mental health, which we work with as a community partner as well. And they brought in, how to talk to your child about suicide, and that it is hard for me to even say out loud.
Right. It's hard. It's a hard topic. It's a hard topic to discuss among adults. It's a hard topic to discuss among children.
And so they use Picoult High School, as a platform, but Facebook is where we got most of our audience. And so that was pretty cool that we had 50 plus people watching and learning. And that's just the extended from our school that we do. We work with the public police or Picoult Public Police, and we work with the community resources with community partners. And for instance, we have what is called behavior technicians. Their sole purpose in elementary schools is to help with those students and their behaviors and stress loads. And we work with a partnership like Health West and Children's Mental Health, and even, the BHC, Behavioral Health Center in Idaho Falls and so forth. We are a partner in all of these different avenues. And we have a multi-tiered system of support which provides services to all students and then builds the intensity of interventions for students in greater need. Even to the backpacks of food that we give away on the weekends and so forth. It's just overwhelming, the things that we do. I could probably talk to you for about an hour, but it's just really important to know that all of us are working together seamlessly, nonstop, and it's an individual needs. It's not necessarily always a school-wide or district-wide. It's individual needs.
Right, and we know we're just going to scratch the surface on all of this topic today, right? And it sounds like you just said it. The challenge is identifying when that learner needs extra support. So once that child is identified, can you tell me a little bit more about the community supports that we have available to us, as you mentioned, to take care of the whole child?
You bet. It's really important to know that we do have resources that are at our fingertips for families, for parents, for students, and some of those are, children's mental health. We can bring them in and work with the parent and the student. They have access to all types of resources, wraparound services, the YES program, Family Alliance. behavioral health centers for those, inpatient treatment and so forth. They're our bridge to all those opportunities.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Health West partnership. Can you dive into that a little bit deeper and tell us what is that partnership and what does it mean for our learners and their families?
You bet. And again, this is not anything new. We've had this. This is our second year in the running that we interviewed partners throughout the community that provided counseling services. And we realized that at some of our schools that have the ability to provide counseling at school, to give those resources to parents that for whatever reason have no resources to connect the student to a counselor or get the student to a counselor. And so this isn't for everybody. It isn't for somebody that's already has those supports. But if we have identified a student that needs that intense, we can provide those opportunities now at the school level. So Health West is actually housed in 3 of our different schools right now. And what a great opportunity. The kids don't necessarily have to get out of school for an appointment. The parents don't have to search for a counselor. These are opportunities that we can provide.
Wow. So we've brought that service right directly to our learners in-house at school.
Yep.
How does that work for the learner so that we're always worried about privacy and that kind of discretion? How are we dealing with that?
We are very keen to and know how important it is, especially for our learners, to keep that, privacy of it's their story, not our story to tell. So when we say we house, a Health West counselor, nobody knows when you're getting called down to the office for a purpose or a reason, where they're going. And so that's how we do it. We pull them down to what we call the counseling office, and then from there they go to the opportunity to work with that counselor from Health West. And then what happens is, if they have a math test that day and that hour is not a good hour to be doing counseling, then we reschedule. That's pretty dang easy.
Right.
And then the opposite side of that, if the kid's having a bad day and that day wasn't their scheduled opportunity, then we have an opportunity to have them available.
So there's a little bit of flexibility there, and then that academic priority is still first.
Absolutely.
And is this something that we plan to replicate across other schools? You mentioned that it's at 3 schools right now.
Yes. And way back, Blue Cross brought this partnership opportunity up for us a couple years ago. And we started off piloting a school and then added 2 schools this year. And now we're adding 3 more schools next year.
Wow.
So it's building. If it would be across every school tomorrow if I could.
Right.
But we are in shortage of counselors.
Right. So that's one of the hurdles, right?
Yeah. And you can't squeeze lemonade from a lemon if you don't have it out there. And I know that our counselors are in high demand right now, and I don't want to take an opportunity from the community as well, but
right.
We're slowly, progressively getting. But
it's something that we're in tune with, something that we've seen a need, that we're meeting, coming up with solutions to meet that need. Absolutely. In a very creative way that works for our learners, that works for our school staff, yes. And something to look forward to, maybe seeing that in some of our schools yes. down the road. Wonderful. So you also mentioned a phrase that I don't know that our average parent or community member may know, and that's trauma-informed classroom. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means and what are some of those trauma-informed classroom strategies our teachers are using and why?
So trauma-informed classroom is, if I had to wrap it up, would be educating our teachers, our learners, and parents from abroad about the ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and about the brains that have been exposed to trauma. And so to create a trauma-informed classroom, you do what best practices to support all of your learners, but most importantly, those learners that have been through trauma. So what are some of those strategies? You create a culture of safe conversation, relationship, and trust to nurture the whole child. For instance, just making sure that their sleeping and eating patterns, you talk about it, you talk about what's healthy. You connect, you create this therapeutic web of a team at school to make sure that you're covering all avenues and not just a certain space. And then, support the need with awareness of self-regulation. We talk about flipping the brain. That's a unique topic, and to be able for the student to understand that their brain is not in thinking mode is invaluable. And what do I mean? So if you had a student that poked another student in class, and typical response from a teacher back when I was in grade school and so forth was, don't touch that other student. Stop that. What are you doing? And then now the response is, hey, can I talk to you outside for just a second? So what were you thinking? So what happened right before you touched that other student? Was there a noise? Was there something that they did, something they said? So that we can go back to what is causing it, and then we talk about, well, how do you think they felt? And how can we make that right? And so that it creates this nurturing, hold accountable, yet we're all learning how to navigate through things that cause different emotions from different students.
Right.
So this is a trauma-informed classroom. It's not a get away with, no consequences. You bet, there's still a consequence. But we educate and we teach and we talk about consequence doesn't fix the behavior. What fixes it is learning and understanding our own bodies.
Absolutely. And we're, this is going to be really important for us moving forward because we've all, in a sense, been through trauma with the pandemic, with the social isolation, with the different schedules, financial hardships that may have been induced by the pandemic for families. So that's really overwhelming, and that responsibility for us as educators is going to be as we start bringing everyone back. It's a collective effort of caring, right?
Right. And I, they call it secondhand trauma. Our teachers have been through trauma. They're learning new ways to teach, and each one of us have been impacted by COVID in different ways. If we've known somebody that's got sick, or we might have lost a loved one. But the secondhand trauma is, you learn of all the stories of all your kids. And one of the things at the secondary level is our teachers with the smaller classes have gotten to know the kids at a deeper level.
Right.
And that's called secondhand trauma as well. So it's important that we understand that not only are students and our parents going through their own stresses and trauma, that our staff is not only going through their trauma, but secondhand trauma as well.
Really, because they're worried about their students and trying to find ways to support their students outside of supporting their own families and their own fears or insecurities with some of the things that they've been facing. So I think that's really important. So let's talk for a minute about what parents and educators can do to help kids during this time. What are some of the resources parents and learners can turn to for support?
My first and foremost resource that I feel like I wish every parent knew about was please call your school counselor if you're just really looking for something, specific. They are a plethora of information from them that are resources from the community that they connect you with.
Right, and they're readily accessible, right? How are some ways that, let's say somebody feels a little bit unsure about reaching out to a counselor, what's the best way to reach out?
You can email, you can call the school directly and ask for the counseling office. There's multiple ways that you can reach out to the counselor, but the key thing is that I don't think it's at the forefront of parents or students' minds right now.
Right.
And they need to know that's available, and all of our counselors are ready for that. They're ready with all these resources, and they've connected to more students than they've ever connected. They'll tell you that. But it's the students that, have a hard time asking or not even knowing who to ask.
Right.
They've never had this experience before. Those are the ones that, just reach out to your school counselor.
So we have those resources available then. The school counselors, the community resource workers that work in our school, they're readily available to connect our families to not only school resources, but those outside resources, right?
Absolutely. And how can you help is like staying positive and talking about your struggles and what you do. What do you do when you get stressed? I go for a walk, or I breathe, or I take a bath, or, and then if you don't even know yourself what you do, you kind of do it innately, then research it with them. What can we do? What would work for you? Because we're all going through at different degrees, at different levels of stress and, trauma at different levels and degrees, and working through that. This is that learning that we talked about earlier, it's not always about in the book.
Right.
It's life learning skills.
It is really life learning skills. And we have some great counselors. So you mentioned that article by Dr. David Walker, who's a school counselor at Alameda. He's been publishing lots of columns in the Idaho State Journal. So I highly recommend that parents check out this article. He wrote one that was published just recently about what to expect and some tips and tricks to use as our kids, especially our secondary learners, head back to school full time.
And I couldn't have said it better. They need to really read that article to really, I can hit the top 5 or 6 things he talked about with the sleep and disconnecting with your social media, and because they've been connected way too many days, and breakfast and lunch and social interaction on an overload. Those dynamics are going to change.
Right.
And it's going to be stressful. And it's okay. It's okay. And what are we going to do?
What are we going to do? And we'll add that link in our show notes so that parents can easily access that article, because it is a really good resource to tap into right before we head back to school. So let's talk just for a minute. Is there anything that I didn't cover in my questions, Tonya, that you want to add here?
No, I just, more than anything, we're continually, I've been in education, like I said, 25, and I'm not going to give you exact number, plus years. And I do a book study every year with, the people that I'm working with currently, like with my athletic directors, we're doing a book study. At our schools, each school's doing a book study. We're always continually learning. And when we're continually learning, we're learning new methods and new ways to connect, and hopes that one will plant a seed in these learners' bodies while they're growing. And I think Denzel Washington put it best when he said, in order to change your life, change your thoughts. And as a coach, it made sense. You think you're going to make it, you're going to make it. You think you're going to miss, you're going to miss. But right. I never looked at it in real life. Your thoughts, like if you're thinking negative, like, oh, this is just horrible, and then that's going to become your life. But if you're thinking, okay, what's the positives here? I got to spend more time with my family. I watched my daughter make me do a TikTok,
right.
to just bring out family dynamic time and things like that the silver linings is what you need to focus on.
Absolutely. And we've been focusing on the silver linings a lot as a district, and I think that's really helped, because they've been really hard times, but you have to look for that positive so that we can continue to help each other just kind of wade through this. And I think we're seeing some of the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. And I think our wellness committee hit it on the dot with the 21 and 21 days.
Absolutely. That was really fun.
Our staff had a really good time, calling a friend for no reason just to check in, or
right.
And it challenged us to do one thing each day. And I had an athletic director's like, I was skipping across my house. I would have never thought of doing that.
And that was the directive, but my daughter and I skipped up and down our driveway, which is a really long driveway. So that was really fun to do with my 13-year-old and kind of think outside of the box. So we've been doing those little things for our staff just to, we're trying to live our mission to think more, learn more, and be more together. And so it's really important that we continue to do that as a community as we work through some of these issues.
Absolutely.
So before we sign off, it's time to switch gears, and you mentioned the book study, so this is a great segue into that. Part of the purpose of this podcast is really to get to know some of the leadership and people behind the district. So, we'll have teachers on here, we'll have students on here, getting to know some of our learners. Anyway, one of the questions that I asked Dr. Howell last week was, I picked this up from my favorite podcast, which is called What Should I Read Next? And Tonya, I have a stack of books on my desk that you've given to me. You've given me almost all of them to say, hey, you need to read this. Hey, you need to read this. And so it really helps us tap in to some of the minds leading the educational efforts in Pocatello and Chubbuck. So I'm going to ask you, what is the last book you read? Okay. What are you reading now? And what's up next in your to-be-read pile?
So I like to mix it up because, I love learning, and I love just kind of staying abreast of the things that are working. But the last book that I read was Small Great Things, which was very impactful. I read
that one too. That was great.
Jodi Picoult. Oh my gosh, that was pretty impactful, and that was a fun read. And then I'm currently reading The Body Keeps the Score. It's the brain, mind, and body and the healing of trauma. A phenomenal book. New Horizons High School is actually doing it as a book study and had him come and speak to them. It's really
They had
really
the author
good.
Come and speak?
Absolutely. It was awesome. It was awesome. And then my next one that's in my collection to do, and I'm hoping to do it over spring break, is Where the Crawdads Sing. I've heard it's really good. And so that's, again, one of my leisurely books that I'm excited to read.
Those are all three. I've read Small Great Things, and I've listened to most of Where the Crawdads Sing. Very good. And then Where the Body Keeps the Score is one of those books that you and Amy Prescott gave to me that's on my desk. And I've started kind of reading that chapter by chapter. So we'll put all those books also in our show notes, because I think it's really interesting. And it's interesting for our community to know what are we studying and where are we headed in terms of how we think educationally. So thank you so much for sharing all of those.
You know, and one of the book studies that we're talking about, we're on that topic for a minute, was Lost at School. That was probably the most impactful on my teachers when I was a principal at Irving Middle School. And part of that was learning that as adults, we have our adult theories. We think we know.
Right.
Until we actually ask the student and listen, truly listen, that we really find out what can be impactful to them, and that every single child wants to learn. And it just truly impactfully changed my educators' mindsets on how they communicated, how they responded, and even to our own kids. You know, our adult theories. We feel like we know because of our own experiences, but boy, that's a really good book as well.
Well, I want to thank you on the behalf of the district. It's been a joy to get to know you and a pleasure to work with you. You are a wonderful asset to our school district because you're constantly thinking of how we can support our learners in better and more effective ways and really develop those meaningful relationships. And so I wanted to bring you on so that we could share that message with our community so that they know some of the things that are happening behind the scenes. So I just want to thank you for being here today and sharing all that information with us.
I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, so I have just a few housekeeping things before we wrap up. We want to remind everyone that learners in K through 12 will resume a 5-day week schedule on Monday, March 1st. There are no changes to the elementary schedule, but all grades 6 through 12 will be resuming that 5-day a week schedule. Those learners that are enrolled in the online learning program for the final trimester of the school year will continue that schedule through the end of the year. So if you're already enrolled, there's no changes. You will continue that. Please note, face coverings will continue to be required for all learners, staff members, and visitors to district school buildings and facilities, likely through the duration of the school year. If that changes, we will certainly let you know immediately. I also want to take this opportunity to remind our community that the supplemental levy renewal that we talked about last week on our first podcast is coming up on March 9th. Early voting is in progress and will continue through Friday, March 5th at the Bannock County Elections Office, which is adjacent to the courthouse. You've been listening to More Together with School District 25 with today's guest, Director of Student Support Services and District Athletic Director Tonya Wilkes. Tonya, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to today's podcast. Our mission at School District 25 is to think more, learn more, and be more together. If you enjoy this podcast, remember, check us out every Friday with a new episode available on our YouTube channel. And if you have an issue you'd like to hear more about, send your ideas or questions to communications@sd25.us.